Okay, so we've done a whole lot of talking about intervals at this point. Now I want to show you some real-world examples of these intervals in use through some famous songs. First interval we'll look at is thirds. I'll only give you a couple examples of each, but I think it'll be enough to do the job. Anybody that's gigged here in Columbus, Ohio long enough knows that there's a song that you're just expected to know, and it's never been particularly one of my favorites, but boy oh boy, I sure have played it with a lot of bands, if not most. And it's called Brown Eyed Girl. And the intro is done very much the same as the example I gave you earlier of horizontal triads. In other words, it's a G major scale played up the string. In the example I gave you earlier, I played a C major scale up the string, starting here. Now I'm going to play for this song right here. And all that happens in this song is that they harmonize this first couple notes in thirds. So here's what it looks like. It's made up of two things. This and this. And these two shapes are both major and minor thirds. And they just use them to go up the neck in a little sequence, and this is the intro to the song. Looks like this slowly. And then the same thing up starting with your first finger on the 12th. So when you hear it played tempo, okay, so there's an example of thirds. Now, something a little more from my time period. I'm a product of the 80s and the hair metal. One of the good example of thirds in that is from a Poison solo. Also around here we play Talk Dirty to Me a lot by Poison. And the start of the solo, C.C. DeVille solo in that, is entirely thirds. I think it's inspired by the Chuck Berry thing because a lot of his licks kind of came from, well, a lot of everybody's licks come from Chuck Berry, but the entire first part of this solo is thirds. Let me show you this one. Starts out like this. This is what it looks like slowly. Starting on C and harmonizing it with an E or major third. See how similar that sounds to, they have the same kind of vibe. There's another example. So that's what thirds sound like in a contemporary sense. Fourths. I'm going to switch settings for this. This is so much heavy metal, we could never name it all if we wanted. Some famous examples of fourths. I think of, well, Ted Nugent first. And if you look at my shapes, when I taught you fourths earlier, it was always the sound of the note you're playing and the note underneath it, no matter where you do it. So, when you see this song, you see mostly with some A notes thrown in the bottom. Sounds like this. There's a whole slew of riffs just like that. Another one that comes to mind is, I'm a big Ozzy Osbourne fan, and I like I Don't Know a lot. I Don't Know is almost the same riff, same key, just done a little different. Still, fourths, and with an A on the bottom. Sounds like this. So it almost looks the same. And since we're doing that, can't forget this one. But I'm sure you already know that one already. But anyway, that's what fourths sound like. All this idea of moving around notes right underneath the ones on top. Okay? So if we move on to another real popular interval, fifths. Another, which we could never name them all. The one that always comes to my mind that I like. Now if you look at this one, it's made up mostly of your garden variety power chords, or perfect fifths. Except for this one had a perfect fourth in it too. Did you see it? Looks like it. It's actually still perfect fifth. But if you remember, perfect fifth and perfect fourth, almost the same thing. So there's another one, perfect fifth. Here's another example. That's a song by Black Sabbath called Heaven and Hell. Entirely perfect fifths. You notice my fingers never even changed. And that brings us to the last really practical interval, which is sixes, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Sixes are used quite a bit. Just to give you something fun to play with, something little, there's an ending that happens on almost every blues tune that involves sixes. You don't even have to have played guitar to know how it goes or have heard it a bunch. But it's very similar. Let me show you. If you remember, sixes look like, or like this. At the end of a blues tune, it's very common to hear something like this. I'm going to do a blues ending in the key of A. So a lot of times you'll hear in the turnaround section, or the last 4 bars, you'll hear, then you'll hear the ending. If you look at these last couple notes, sixes. I'll do it slower. Okay, and probably the most famous example of sixes that I can think of right now, excuse me, is Wanted Dead or Alive by Bon Jovi. The entire first section of this song is an exercise in sixth intervals. Again, both majors and minors. This is what it looks like slow. A If you notice, it's all just that shape moving down the neck. The only difference is I throw in a D string every now and then. Here it is slow and then up to speed. A little bit faster. So there you have it. There's some famous examples of intervals of thirds, intervals of fourths, intervals of fifths, and intervals of sixths. Now, as I said before, sevens, not so much. They happen and they can be used, and they can be used just as easily as the others. but in common language, it just doesn't happen that often. So there you have it. We come to the end of another DVD. Hope you learned about intervals. I think this is one of those things that will unfold for you the more you study music theory and the more you study the guitar. It's not limited to just what you learned about today. It really will unfold in ways that I can't even really describe to you at this point. We just have to wait until we get there. So make sure you check out the next DVD. That's when all this is going to come into play. For right now, it's Matt Venus. Just want to tell you thanks for watching the DVDs. I hope you enjoyed them. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up at mattvenus.com, and we'll see if we can't get you taken care of. Take care. See ya.